Okay, now comes the time when we have to do the takedown of each gun to look at the internal parts. So I will actually cover the takedown of each weapon here. Now with the Smith & Wesson M&P, you just slide this down. Now you do have the option of pushing that little piece down with the tool like I showed you in another video, but I don't do that. I just let the slide go back forward, pull the trigger, slide comes right off. Now with the Glock, I will admit I am not good at doing this with the Glock. These little levers get the best of me every time. But I'll lock the slide, you lock the slide back, and then you have to pull this down, and then you slide the trigger, there. Just not as easy to me. I mean, granted, I suck at taking apart a Glock, but it's just not as easy to me. Those two little things to pull down are harder to pull down than just leaving that little switch down and leaving it down. So, easier takedown for me goes to the Smith & Wesson, even though it does have that other step that could complicate it. You don't have to use it. So overall, easier takedown for the Smith & Wesson M&P, in my opinion. Now, as far as the internals of the slides go, the Glock and the Smith & Wesson M&P, I really don't see a lot of difference. I mean, they both have metal inserts into polymer frames. They work on the basically very similar premises here as far as the mechanics go. They both have all metal rails. Your slide never rides on plastic rails like with some guns where shaving can become an issue. Even though those aren't the primary rails in those guns, they still do contact polymer. In this, it never really contacts polymer. It's always riding on a metal rail. Different types of inserts here. The Smith & Wesson seems to use more metal than the Glock, but it doesn't seem to use it in a way that's going to make much of a difference. So as far as the internals go, these guns are just too similar to call a difference between the two. They're pretty much identical as far as the frames go. Now, I do know the Smith & Wesson uses stainless steel for all of its parts, but I don't know about Glock, but I assume they do. Now we'll look at the internals of the slides. Not really much difference here either. They're both pretty well made, well machined, not a lot of burrs or nicks or anything. Both very smooth, both finished on the interior. Biggest difference you can see is the positioning of the firing pin stop here, the firing pin safety. But otherwise, very similar designs, very similar quality looks-wise, so just very close. So not a lot of difference between the two internals of the slides. Now, one advantage I will give to the Smith & Wesson M&P over the Glock is that the Smith & Wesson M&P is a stainless steel slide. If the melanite finish wore off, it would still be safe to keep it just like it is. You can even bead blast it out to a stainless finish, whereas the Glock is a carbon steel slide, so it does need to keep the finish on it. But as far as machining-wise, pretty much a dead heat there on that. Okay, now the guide rods. Now this is a little bit unfair here because as you can see, both of these have nice stainless steel guide rods. The only difference is this stainless steel guide rod in the Smith & Wesson came standard with the gun. That's what it comes with. That's what you're going to get. If you walk out of a store with one, you'll have that nice stainless steel guide rod. With the Glock, this one has a nice stainless steel guide rod in it, but this is one I put in it myself. Mad Bad Voodoo sent me this guide rod a long time ago. It belonged to a gentleman that unfortunately had a tragic end, and I'm really glad to have this after looking at it, especially after watching his website and watching all of his videos. He seems like he's a top-notch guy, so I'm really glad that I have this, and it means a lot to me. But if you buy the gun just standard off the shelf, this is what you'll get, a plastic guide rod. Now, is a plastic guide rod really much worse than a stainless steel guide rod? Well, that's a debate I'll leave up to another time, but right now I'll have to say, plastic guide rod seems to work quite well in most Glocks. But if you want to just say which one has a better build quality, and want to say it's made out of a better material, of course stainless is a better material than plastic in my opinion. So the M&P would have a little bit of an edge because it does come standard with the stainless guide rod. Like the stainless one you see here in the Glock would just be polymer. Okay, the barrels. Now, as you can see, the Glock barrel, like I said earlier, is about a ½ inch longer, but otherwise very similar barrels, both one piece with ramped barrels, so just very similar barrels, but there are a couple things that will give the Smith barrel the advantage. One, I know it's a stainless steel barrel. I think the Glock might be stainless steel barrel, but I'm not sure, but it may just be carbon steel. But I know the Smith & Wesson one is stainless steel. I'll do a little research here and note that when I get done with this video here. Another difference is the rifling. This one has the Glock rifling in it, whereas the Smith & Wesson is a more traditional rifling. So as we all know, shouldn't shoot lead in this one. Lead's okay in this one. That's one advantage. Now the other advantage is a small advantage. But if you drop the round in there, if I can get this to focus in. There we go. As you can see, that's very well supported. You don't really see any unsupported areas in that. Whereas if you put it in the Glock barrel, still fairly well supported, but I don't know if this will show up very well on camera. But there is a little bit of area underneath at the ramp that is a little less supported than it is on the Smith & Wesson barrel. But it's such a minute difference. But if you're really a stickler about barrel support, that little difference down there might bother you some. But still, overall, both decent barrels, but I do give a little bit of an edge to the Smith & Wesson barrel. Okay, there you have a pretty thorough teardown of both of these guns as I went through them piece by piece. Now, as you can see, the Smith & Wesson wins in most categories. In most categories, I have to give an edge to Smith & Wesson, even though it's only slight. You know, they use stainless steel for all their parts. It takes down easier. Every little part seems to be just a little bit better made, a little more attention to detail, a little more refined. The grip serrations work better. The sights are better. The magazine fits into the gun better. It's a more integral part of the body. So when you're just looking at the physical characteristics of each gun, it seems like the Smith & Wesson would be the clear winner, but here's where it gets a little bit weird. And the weird part is me, my own personal weird preferences and opinions. So, like I say, when you look at it on a subjective or an objective point of view and just look at each individual piece, you know, mostly objectively, sometimes a little subjectively. But when you look at it just piece by piece, the Smith & Wesson wins the vast majority of time, like I said before. Better parts, better materials, better attention to detail, it seems. Better design, it seems. Not better design, but, you know, a little more design put into it. But still, every time, if you lay these two guns down side by side and ask me to pick which one I like better, just looking at them, feeling them, touching them, you know, just a very tactile, visceral, you know, just response to which one I like better, it's always going to be the Glock. It just seems to be every time I actually like it better. I like the feel, I like the look, I like the simple lines, I like the cleanness. Even though I don't really care for the bullnose thing, I can overlook that. And like I say, in the 27s and 26s and stuff, that doesn't really exist as bad. It just seems to be in this size and the largers. But overall, I just like it. Now, if you've ever been in my home or seen pictures of my home, you know I like things clean, I like straight lines, I like things simple, I like a lot of color, but that doesn't affect this. But, you know, overall, I like things clean and simple, and maybe that affects my decision a little bit, but overall, I'm going to have to say the Smith & Wesson probably, you know, if he's rated them on a scale 1 to 10, just on build quality and aesthetics, the Smith & Wesson is probably a 9, and the Glock is probably a 7.5 or an 8. But as far as my own personal preference of which one I would rather have in my hand, not based on reliability or performance, just based on, like I said, the build quality and the looks, it would be the Glock.